Okay, colleagues, it is already 6 p.m. Hong Kong time. So maybe you are in the morning, afternoon, or evening. So first of all, thank you for joining this webinar, which is concerned about global learning and internationalization. Now, before we start, of course, we have to think about why bother about global learning. Now, for many universities, I think they do global learning for the sake of global learning because they will have more materials for news publicity. They will tell others that, okay, we have served the underprivileged in Africa, in Southeast Asia, etc., etc. So I guess the first thing, which is very important for us to have some reflection, is why bother about global learning and also internationalization. I think for colleagues in Hong Kong, they all know that internationalization is a KPI for all universities. So again, what is our motivation for doing this and how are we going to do this? Okay, so tonight we are very pleased to have this webinar on this very important topic. I think universities all over the world are now talking about internationalization, global learning. So we got two very qualified colleagues with us, Grace and Stephen again. If you joined the webinar last time, no, the one in March, then they also talk in that webinar. So without further ado, I will now hand over the time to Grace and Stephen. Please.
Okay, thank you, Professor Shek. So I am Grace Lee. This is Stephen Chan, and we are from the Service Learning and Leadership Office at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. So let me share my screen. And last time I didn't do it right, so hopefully this time, I hope this is correct. Okay, thank you, Daniel. Yeah, okay, so the topic, the title of our talk is Service Learning as a Vehicle for Global Learning and Internationalization. So, Stephen, would you like to start?
Okay, well, first of all, I think we probably should introduce the two organizations that sponsor or organize this webinar. First of all, there is the University Social Responsibility Network. There is also a newly formed kind of organization, the Asia Pacific Regional Community of Practice under the International Association for Research on Service Learning and Civic Engagement, right? Okay, let us start. Now, the first question is, why do we go on international service learning? 2 weeks ago, we talked about service learning at our home university and the impact that it is making. Today, we are going to focus on one big area in service learning, which is the international aspects of service learning. And the reason why we are doing this is because service learning is able to help us achieve many learning outcomes. And one of them in particular is cross-cultural immersion, which we feel is very important. Now, I was just doing a little bit of self-reckoning just now. Here in Hong Kong, we eat mangoes from Philippines. We eat rice from Thailand, eggs from Japan, which I didn't know before. We eat chicken from the United States, chicken and pork from Brazil, beef from Australia. At the same time, Hong Kong companies, we know firsthand, they are building apartments in Vietnam, in Cambodia, but they are also building casinos in Cambodia. What does that mean? How do we do this? What are the ethics behind these activities? How do we educate our students to grow up to become professionals involved in all of these endeavors all over the world, particularly in our region? Those are the reasons some of the major reasons why we feel international service learning is so important, because it helps our students to acquire a global outlook and understand the ethical issues involved in different things that we do. Now, there is a lot of literature already available. So we are just listing some of them as if it is still needed to support what we are doing. But there is so much that we are not going to go for go through them in detail. We just want to point out there is a lot of research pointing to the benefits of doing service learning in the international context, strengthening global citizenship, helping our students to develop intercultural effectiveness so that they know how to function in the global market in an ethical way, in a responsible way, all right? Now, specifically at our university, our management has decided to set we feel, quite an ambitious target. By 2028, we're going to have all of our students having a significant outbound learning experience. We use the term outbound because Hong Kong is such a small place. For us, mainland China is something quite different from Hong Kong. So we include that as our outbound experience. And the purpose, of course, is to increase their global outlook, awareness, and inclusivity. Right? Those are very, very positive outlooks. Now, at the same time, even though this is something specific to PolyU, we are sure that something like that happens with every country, every university. Now, in Hong Kong, we have, I think it helps to understand our own context. If you look at the big pie on the left, the blue part of it, like which is more than 90% of 95% of Hong Kong are Chinese, right? They all look like me and Grace and Professor Shek and most of the people you see. That's the reality in Hong Kong. Now, even though we do have some what we call minority populations, such as people from the Philippines and Indonesia, those are our biggest minority groups. But even then, they constitute no more than maybe 2 or 3% of Hong Kong. We do have some quite a significant number of people from South Asia, countries like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka. We also have some Japanese. I have many neighbors in my own building who are from Japan, and then Korea, and so on and so forth. But the reality is that putting them all together is no more than 5% of Hong Kong.
Another significant part of the picture is that if we look at the graph to the right, and this is from the government 2016 by census, a significant part of our minority population is actually not resident, right? So we have a very significant migrant labor population from the Philippines and Indonesia, and then to a lesser extent from South Asia. Now, what does that mean? That basically means that if we look at it, from the point of view of a young person growing up in Hong Kong, there are not a lot of opportunities for our young people to interact with peers, with people on the peer level outside of their own race and ethnicity. As much as we want to say Hong Kong is an international city, for many of our young people, the reality is that if they interact with somebody outside of their own race and ethnicity, either it is going above to the teachers, the English teacher, who might be from, US, Canada, Australia, whatever, okay, or with a power difference, interacting beneath them, with their domestic helper, from the Philippines or from Indonesia. It's unfortunate to think of it as that way, but actually, the reality is that for many of our young people, almost all interactions as they are growing up with people outside of their own race and ethnicity, there are very significant structural power differences there. And this is something that, I think that for us living in Hong Kong, we need to recognize, as much as we like to call ourselves the international city, this is the reality of what our young people are growing up in.
Okay. Now, if you look at the left, you cannot read, many of you probably cannot read Chinese, but I'll explain the significance of what is posed here. This is a notice from a kindergarten, right? This is a kindergarten for kids who are like 3 to 6 years old, 3 to 5 years old, essentially. This is a tour organized by the kindergarten, proposing to take their students, remember, these are 3 to 6 years old, to a tour to the United States. This is, of course, positioned as a learning tour, right, for 3 to 5 years old and their parents. Okay, this is, of course, well, more exposure should be good for any student as young as 3 to 5. But notice that the cost per head is roughly $3,800 US dollars, $3,800 US dollars per head to take one child, 3 to 5 years old, to the United States for about 10 days. Now, in Hong Kong, there are not a lot of families who can, well, let me put it this way. There are lots of families who can afford it, but there are also a lot more who cannot afford it, right? So that's at the kindergarten level. On the right-hand side, this is at the university level. Now, the universities in Hong Kong in this table are ranked from the top to the bottom in terms of, on average, how wealthy are the students in that university. Again, the names are in Chinese, so I have to explain that a little bit. The way that this table is compiled is they count on average how many students out of 10 in each university are subsidized by the government because of their, they are in relative poverty. Now, the smaller the number, of course, that means on average, the wealthier is the student population. And according to this ranking, Hong Kong Polytechnic University ranks 5th, right, circled by in red. And you can see from the third column, it says 2.9 students out of 10 at the PolyU are needing of government subsidy in order to attend university. And we are ranked 5th in the whole of Hong Kong. So what does that mean? That means our students on average are poorer than the average universities in Hong Kong. And 2.9 is almost 3 out of 10. Basically, their families do not earn enough to cover their students' tuition, right? So keep that in mind. Now, put that in the context of international service learning. It is good for the students. In general, we know that. So we try as much as possible to send students to international exchange, including international service learning. But can the students afford it? Not all of them, right? Obviously, if they cannot afford to even pay the full tuition, they certainly are not in a position to spend the thousands of US dollars, if not more, to go overseas, even for international service learning. Even if it makes the opportunity available, they are not available to take advantage of it, let alone the other aspect of it. In general, the richer you are as a student, as a child, the more you are exposed to opportunities even before you attend university to go overseas, right? That's obvious. So the tendency is that the richer you are, the more familiar you are with foreign travel, the more you are inclined to think it is fun to go overseas. The less rich you are, the less are you exposed to opportunities like that, even before you attend university. And the more you are anxious about going overseas, the more you worry about finances, about other aspects of it. So there are lots of obstacles for the students to overcome, even if the university offers them the opportunity to go overseas. So we have to address both of these issues. Now, on the first part, the offering of opportunities, when we talk with people from many other universities who are interested in doing international service learning. Many express this concern. How do we do this? How do we arrange this? Where do we find partners? How do we know which country is good for this kind of project? Which universities are good partners to work with? How do we find these people that you feel you can work with? From our experience in the past 10, 12 years, we found that it is actually not too difficult. I'm not saying that it is not difficult. I'm saying that it is not too difficult if you really want to do it. And organizations such as the USRN and the Asia Pacific Community of Practice are there to do exactly that. When we form these coalitions, when we form these partnerships, community of practice, we bring people together so that people can get to know each other, so that people can get to know, hey, in this particular country, there are these people who are interested in doing this. So these are the people that we can probably talk with if we want to do international service. So that tackles the first problem. And then there is a second problem, which is how do we sort of empower our students so that they can take advantage of these opportunities? Now, the first big obstacle is finance. Where are they going to come up with this money so that they can take on, that they go on international exchange, international service learning? So one other thing that we do at our university, which we encourage everybody to do, is to help these students by looking to donors, government, universities' own finances to help them to subsidize their traveling so that they can take these opportunities. Now, having said that, this is what we have done at PolyU. Right? On the top, you see some of the countries that we are doing international service learning with or at. The biggest one, the biggest numbers are in Cambodia, partly because we have been working there for more than 10 years now. There is also Vietnam, Rwanda, Myanmar, Kyrgyzstan, Indonesia, Kazakhstan. These are only some of the countries that we are active in. There are some which we don't go every year, and there are also some which are in the pipelines. In the middle are the numbers. Again, the biggest one is the number underneath Cambodia. This is our biggest project. But there are also other countries which are growing in terms of numbers too. And the lower left-hand corner, you see the growth in terms of numbers that we send to foreign countries. Now, starting with a few dozens. Now we are going up to several hundreds each year, and we have an aim to raise that up to perhaps maybe, I don't know. I don't want to put up a number, but we want to make this number bigger, right? On the right-hand side are just some of the projects that we are doing. Projects that involve science, education, STEM, languages, and engineering, leadership training, capacity building. There are a wide range of projects that are possible in international service learning. Now, here are just some pictures of some of the projects that we do. As I said, Cambodia is one of our biggest project. And so you can see projects where our students are doing workshops, teaching. They are doing eye examinations and STEM teaching and so on and so forth. On the right-hand side is Rwanda. A place very special in our hearts. There we are doing a lot of energy projects, solar panels to generate electricity, building better stove to improve the efficiency of cooking, reduce the pollution, and so on. And then there is also Myanmar and Vietnam, where we are doing the similar type of projects. Okay, the next big question is COVID. If you were paying attention just now, when we talk about numbers overseas, we kind of stop at 2019, and everybody knows why. Because when 2010 hits, basically nobody can travel. We cannot take students to even Cambodia, which is only like 2 hours away. You cannot fly. So what can you do? Now, as far as we know, many universities basically suspend their service learning projects, even local, let alone traveling, right? Traveling is out of the question. even local service learning has largely been suspended because they cannot send the students out. There is no human contact allowed. You cannot even talk. You cannot meet people face to face. How can you do international service learning? It turns out it is still possible because persons cannot travel, but the electrons can travel. The airwaves can travel, right? So, and online you can be there as if you are there in person. So that's what we do, and in fact, that's what not only PolyU is doing this. Everybody basically is doing this in different ways to different extents. So a lot of service learning went online, including international service learning. Well, in fact, if you can do local service learning online, why can't you do it overseas? Right? The distance doesn't matter anymore when nobody is traveling, only your words travel and your face travel. So that's what we do. Here is a project that involves some tangible thing. This is what makes these projects different, because a lot of service learning online involve teaching, right? That kind of online service learning is obvious. You speak to each other. Teacher speaks to the students online. That's what a lot of schools are doing, right? So moving the classroom to online, including workshop type, instruction type, is fairly intuitive. But what these projects demonstrate is that you can do tangible things online, even robotics, right? So if you look at the middle panel, you see a robot field which tries to imitate the guts in your belly, right? So the idea is that in your belly, in the guts of your belly, there are good things and there are bad things. The bad things, of course, come from bad food that you eat, like French fries and a lot of fats and that kind of stuff. So we teach the students to build robots to go into the guts to take them out, right? So that involves robotics, programming, design, and we do this online. Now, of course, we do have to ship the robot kits and a lot of the physical stuff to our partners, both local partners and partners in South Africa, in Vietnam, right? So we have to do a lot of planning so that we can build those things and send them overboard, and then online teach them to put them together, do their programming, and teach them AI. Now, this is AI which doesn't involve very heavy programming, but more in terms of training an AI to recognize bad things, such as French fries, right? Hamburgers, right? Well, they are not all bad, but there are bad things in them. So we want to teach the students to train an AI to recognize those, and then instruct your robot to go into your guts to pick them up, get rid of them. All right, so combining science and artificial intelligence, IT, and biology, healthy lifestyles, many things all rolled together. And you can see some of the faces there. Many of the faces are Chinese. Now, those are mainly our students, but there are also a lot of faces which are of darker people. They are from South Africa. Children living in the townships who don't normally have access to this kind of technology and AI and stuff like that. And now, because of international service learning, because of the work that we work with University of Victoria in South Africa, things like this are happening. Also in Vietnam, we partner with a very good organization, a local NGO. And this is how things work, right? So let's move on. On the other hand, we also have other projects which require quite a bit more technology, more tangible technology. This is about energy. This is about installing solar panels so that people who do not have electricity can generate electricity to turn on lights to charge their mobile phones. Now, before 2020, we were able to build those things, carry them over to Rwanda, to Cambodia, to Myanmar to install them ourselves. Our students would do that themselves. since we cannot travel, we send those material over by airplane. We do not travel ourselves. And you can follow this by following the numbers. If you look at the map on the left-hand side, try see if you can find the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and follow the numbers. Then you can follow the story, right? In 1 and 2 on the left-hand side, right, should be easy to find them. That's when our students are building them, putting things together in PolyU. Then number 3, they transport them, not physically, right? We have a company to do that, to move that, after we package everything, move that to the airport. Then the plane will fly them to Rwanda. Number 4, they arrive in Rwanda. Number 5, our local partners pick them up, move them to their premises. In number 6, now here, this is one of the most complicated parts. In number 6, our local partners unpack those stuff. Our students set up video links with them so that they, while our students are still in Hong Kong, they can instruct our local partners who are in Rwanda, like almost 10,000 kilometers away, to assemble them together. Finally, our local partners, they would carry them to the village in number 7 and number 8. And then at the village, they install the solar panels. Now this time, it is all done by our local partners. Our students are not physically there. They are spiritually there, electronically they are there, but not physically. Physically, only our local partners, the local youths who live in those villages, who are installing the solar panels, building the better stove so that they can have cleaner living. On the right-hand side, you see the scale of things, right? On the upper right, you see a map of Rwanda. You see a bundle of pins overlapping each other, right? It might look like one big pin, but in fact, if you look at the lower right-hand corner, you see there are more than 100, in fact, 150 pins, each representing a house, in which we have installed a set of solar panels so that they can have electricity, lighting, charging mobile phones. And I will just quickly cover a couple more projects. This is our so-called One World, Our World Leadership Program. Here, we bring students together, again, electronically. It is hosted in Hong Kong, but students, they participate from different locations. Some of them are our own international students. Some of them are students from other countries who participate in this summer program, right? There, they learn together how, by participating in 2 subjects hosted by our instructors working in Hong Kong. But students, foreign students, can participate electronically online in those projects. Now, this is one which specifically involves partner universities from USRN network, right? Here, this is collaborative online international learning, right? Quite a mouthful. Basically, the idea is that students participate online. They work together virtually, but the projects are very real. In fact, very impressive. In the next slide, we're going to show you the effect. But first of all, let us just point out some of the universities involved. On the upper right hand, you see University of Maryland, a university that we have been collaborating with for quite a number of years. In fact, they have sent students with us to Rwanda, to Cambodia, and we have been working on different forms of collaborative teaching for many years. And then you have University of Pretoria, Kyoto University, Xi'an universities. These are member universities of USRN network. This time, they are all joining into participating in this class that we are organized. And in the next slide, we're going to show you some of the very impressive results. This time, they built a virtual museum for refugees. On the left, starting from the left-hand side, this is kind of the entry point, right? Where we showcase different stories, situations that the refugees went through. What the students do is each of them will choose an aspect of the refugee issues all over the world. They will do their own research. They will meet some of the refugees, understand what they have went through, and then they try to build an exhibition of their experiences. So let me just very quickly, in the middle, upper middle, you see the beginning of their troubles, right? Some of the context of where does it come from? Where do these refugees come from? Why are there refugees who have to escape from their own country, their own locality, and to go into a unknown world? On the upper right-hand side, this is when their world fall apart, when they feel they are so threatened by war, by poverty, and other troubles that they have to escape and jump into a completely unknown world full of danger. Well, we all know lots of people die on the way and suffer terribly. And there are some of the stories are there in the virtual museum. You can go and see them a bit later. Then in the upper middle, on the right-hand side in the middle, we see some of the journeys that they went through, some of the horror stories that they experienced while they're escaping from the war and other problems. And then many of them arrive at a refugee camp and how that was set up, what their experiences were. And then finally, for some of them, when they are resettled into a new country with a new language, new culture, and new issues, how they deal with those, how are they affected? Now, remember, these are the lucky ones. These are the very small number of lucky ones, well, in a way, who had actually found a new home. Even then, their trouble have not stopped. There are new challenges that they have to face. All right. Then, in the middle lower part, that's the question that our students pose for all of us. Now what? Now that we know a little bit more about this issue, what are we going to do? What is our response? So you can see students from different countries, different universities, they join together online to look into the issue, to talk with the refugees. And together, they build us a museum so that we can go there to understand the issue and try to consider this question. What are we going to do with this?
Okay.
Okay. All right. So it's your turn.
Okay. Sorry for a moment. I was like, what? Yeah. Okay. So after hearing about all of these, examples of service learning projects, right? Then we comes to evaluation. What do our students learn from this? I mean, I asked some of my colleagues the other day when they were talking about their international learning, not service learning, but their international learning experiences. And I was like, but what do we really want our students to learn from this, right? So when it comes from global learning, whenever I ask colleagues that, usually, they kind of fall apart and they're like, well, at least they learn how to speak English better. And then I'm usually like, that's kind of like low level, right? You don't need to, I mean, of course, being on international service learning would help them to learn to speak English better, maybe. But at the same time, you don't need to go to international service learning in order to learn how to speak English better, right? And is that really all that we are aiming for? Right? Then people will say, oh, how to communicate and work with people who are different from you. And that makes sense, right? These are competencies, these are skills that we want our students to have, and as Dr. Chen was saying earlier at the beginning, this is a global world, and our students, when they graduate, chances are that they are going to be working, with people who are different from them. And also, they might actually even be working, for a different country, for different people, right? So these are competencies that are useful to have. Okay, so that's another level up. And then finally, some people say, how to be a global citizen? And then the question is, but what is that? Right? What does it mean to be a global citizen? We say that we toss that term around so often, but what exactly is it? Now, the difficult thing about this issue of global citizenship is that actually there is no universal definition, right? What is global citizenship? actually nobody knows, okay? There is actually no universal definition for a multi-dimensional concept of global citizenship. There is understanding that it is not just a single concept, that global citizenship covers multiple kinds of things, okay? And there is some agreement that global citizens in general, there are three aspects to this. One of them is affective, the values and the attitudes. Okay, so global citizens should respect diversity. They should have a cultural understanding. They should have empathy and compassion for people, even if they don't look, speak, believe the same thing as you do. Okay, there is another aspect that is cognitive, knowledge and skills. They should know about different cultures. And unfortunately, I think a lot of our students just stop there, right? You know, if you bring them overseas and then they come back, what did you learn? Oh, I learned that, I don't know, I learned how to say hello in Korean. Okay, I learned that, you know, in Cambodia, you can't have your feet pointing at people. And okay, that's nice to know, but really, you know, but that's just really head knowledge, right? But that is actually the part, in many ways, that is the easiest for people to learn, right? Knowing more knowledge, understanding more skills. But in addition to all of these just cultural knowledge, we also want our students to understand about, at least to know about social justice, equity, right? Diversity, sustainable development. Right. And then finally, of course, you know, after affective and cognitive is the behavioral, the actions, right? What do you actually do with this, right? Even for our students, when we ask them, you know, earlier when Stephen showed you about the virtual museum, what we want our students, we are very much insistent on that. You give people all of this cognitive knowledge about refugees, but then you've got to push them for action, right? There's an action route. Now what, since you've learned about all these things? Okay, and the same thing applies for global citizenship, right? You hope to impact the values and the attributes. You give them knowledge and skills, right? And then you want these to result in some kind of behavior change, right? Community participation, individual action, etc., etc. Okay, so this is global citizenship. Simpler is the concept of intercultural effectiveness, right? Intercultural effectiveness, it is part of global citizenship, right? Both of them include an understanding of the globalized world, but intercultural effectiveness is more about the cultural differences, about the skills, right? You can kind of see it as the ability for a person to behave appropriately and effectively when, you know, they are in situations with people who are culturally diverse from them, right? So these are like competencies and skills. Okay, so then the question is that, do students learn these, right? When we send them on international service learning, what do they learn? And if these are the things that we want them to learn, do they really learn these things? Okay, now the first study I want to share is before COVID, when we were bringing students out at a lot of effort every year. The projects that Stephen was showing you before, to Cambodia, to Myanmar, Vietnam, so on and so forth, right? So this is before COVID. We studied 400 plus students. They were enrolled in 8 subjects with offshore projects during 2016 and 17. So this was pre-COVID. Okay, and this is what we are seeing. Okay, so 400 plus students. Okay, what we found is that intercultural effectiveness, they gained in intercultural effectiveness and statistically significant gains. Okay, global citizenship is more of a mixed bag. Global citizenship across the 3 aspects, we find that in terms of global competence, okay, the knowledge, the skills, okay, they do gain statistically significantly. Overall, when we get the mean of all of that, they do gain statistically significantly. However, there were no significant increases in the social responsibility and the global civic engagement scores. Okay, another thing that we also learned, we also found was that there were significant variations across projects. So there were some projects in which students learned a lot, they gained a lot, you know, in all aspects. But then we also saw that there were some projects where students really did not shift much at all. We actually saw some where students, you know, literally regressed. Okay, and that was actually kind of disturbing. Okay, so when we looked at this, you know, there are some implications that come to mind. The first implication is that it is a lot easier to gain skills, knowledge, and competencies than it is to change attitudes and beliefs. And I think that that should be quite obvious, right, to everybody. But then as much as it is obvious, I think that this is something that we need to bear in mind, because by and large, everybody is going to say, oh, we send students on international service learning because we want to train them to be global citizens. Really? Can we really do that, right? Especially in a short-term project. maybe we ought to be realistic and actually look at what it can do. Okay. One of the other things that we found when we actually looked into each of the individual projects and when we did interviews with the students was that we found that the students did not really understand, by and large, what global citizenship and intercultural effectiveness was. Okay, and we found that a big part of it was because these two concepts were not explicitly covered or taught in some of the projects. Okay, and especially for Hong Kong students, the concept of citizenship to begin with is not very well understood. So therefore, if you ask them, oh, what about global citizenship that you learned, they're like, what is that? Okay, so one of the things one big takeaway that we found from that study was that it's necessary for us to intentionally teach competencies and attitudes, right? Students do not learn by themselves. In the same way as oftentimes we say in service learning, you can't just simply throw students into the community and expect them to learn. Students learning is not automatic from service learning. Similarly, students learning from international service learning is not automatic. Okay, especially when it comes to effective or attitudinal concepts such as global citizenship and civic responsibility. Okay, now in the COVID era, that then begs the other question: what about online service learning? Right? Is it possible to teach these things in online service learning? So let me share with you another small-scale study that we did, and these are not published results. Just giving you like a sneak peek. We are still going through on the data. So earlier, I hope you remember, Stephen talked about where was that? A project in which we collaborated with the University of Pretoria in South Africa and an NGO in Vietnam to bring STEM, AI and robotics teaching to township students in South Africa and also high school students in Vietnam. So we studied the students, our PolyU students who were involved in these projects. Okay, and this is what we found. Let me find it. Okay. All right, so it's a rather smaller scale study, 28 students, okay? In terms of the general service learning outcomes, we find that they actually score very high. This is on a scale of 1 to 10. And we find that in the general service learning outcomes, the student on average score well above 8, on all aspects, intellectual, social, civic, interpersonal. So they are learning from online service learning. This one is given, okay? Are they learning from intercultural competencies from online international service learning done in this way? It turns out that yes, they do, right? In intercultural competencies, on several aspects, the attitude, openness and curiosity, the skill, okay, and the knowledge, on all three of these aspects, there are statistically significant gains that students learn through participating in this project, not just participating, but through going through this project, through reflections and so on and so forth. So that was one thing that was, comforting to us, reassuring to us, yes, this is something that students do learn. There was another part that we are still analyzing the results, but which I would like to share with you. And that is that we were also curious how connected to our students feel to the people that they're serving in online service learning. And the reason why we thought of that was because in old days, when we brought students to the community in order to serve and learn there, a lot of times students talked about themselves feeling very welcomed by the community. They felt they were a part of the community. They really missed those people. When they were leaving, they were crying and so on and so forth. And what we were thinking about, this kind of connectedness, okay, does it manifest itself when the service learning is done online? So therefore, we also use a scale to measure students' connectedness. Okay, and this is what we are seeing. Okay, we measured 3 aspects: the connectedness to the teaching team, the instructors and the teaching assistants, their teammates, and then the service recipients. Okay, and one of the things, this is on a 5-point Likert scale, okay, from 1 to 5, and we are seeing that students are scoring very high, rating very high their connectedness on these 3 dimensions. So this is the thing that we are seeing. Even though all the interaction is online, students do feel connected, and especially to the community, to the service recipients, 4.4 out of 5. Okay, and this is something that we really do hope to build through service learning. So then the next question is that, okay, can we put this together with this? Okay, how does this connectedness affect this learning on this side? Okay, now this is something that's kind of interesting. Okay, and we have not really studied this in detail, just giving you a sneak peek. One of the things that we are seeing is that the connectedness to the service recipients is most important in explaining students' learning outcome. I think that's not very surprising, right? The more connected they feel they are to the community, the better they feel that they're learning, okay, in terms of the service learning outcomes. Okay, followed by connectedness to the instructor and to the teaching assistants, which also kind of extends. The more connected they feel to the teacher, to the teaching assistants, the better they learn. Okay, no big surprises there. The surprise is this one. The more connected they feel that they are to the teammates, the worse they learn. Okay, so we don't quite understand what's going on here, okay, but we are seeing that connectedness to teammates and peers on average seem to be negatively related to the learning outcomes. Okay, now having said that, this is not always statistically significant. Okay, we need more investigation. We have some theories, okay, about what is happening in here, but we are not very sure. Okay, so take it as it is right now. But I think that the clear thing is that if we want our students to learn from service learning, the connectedness to the community is something that we need to help them to learn. Okay, and this one I think is irrefutable. Okay, the more connected they feel to the community recipients, the better they are going to learn from service learning. So we're getting to the end of this. Okay, just some reflections. How do we help them to build this connection? We oftentimes feel that students are a reflection of ourselves. The more connected we feel to the community, okay, the better our students, the more connected our students feel to the community. So sometimes we think that maybe the focus should actually be on international collaboration rather than international service. We talk a lot about service, right? But maybe we should be thinking more about collaboration. And one of the things that we have been trying to do at PolyU and at Service Learning is to build a tripartite relationship wherever we do international service learning between PolyU, a local university, and a local community. Right. And a big part of the local university piece is that we want our students to have the peer interaction and the peer learning. Right. Remember that earlier we were saying, by and large, Hong Kong students do not have much peer interaction experience with people who don't look, speak, or believe the same thing as they do. Okay, so we're hoping that through the local university collaboration, we can afford our students this peer interaction and peer learning. And in a way, it is also our students having another dimension of learning, in some ways working with the community, not just working for the community, right? And also in a way to address the power and wealth imbalance, because we recognize that when we in Hong Kong, we go to serve internationally, there is always going to be a power difference there. We are the ones who can afford to travel. We are the ones who have all the fancy smartphones and everything. Okay, and when we bring our students directly into the community, that power difference is really huge. However, when we work with a local university and together the students go in to serve the community, it rebalances that a bit. Okay, because our students in a way have to depend on their local peers, and together they go in to serve the community. And this is also the reason why, as Stephen was saying earlier, this is why networks like the IR/APAC COP and the USRN matter so much, because it's through these networks that we can build these collaborations. And we hope to be able to build more of these collaborations in the future. So that is it for our talk. Professor Sheck, I will give the time back to you.
Thank you both for your very stimulating sharing on internationalization and global learning. Now we got two questions. One is from Mark. His question is, how is the course in international online service learning when compared to international face-to-face service learning? When it is possible to do face-to-face already, what do you think would be the time devoted for online and for face-to-face?
That is a very good question. Right? When we can finally travel, okay, is there still a space for online international service learning? Very much it depends on the budget. Okay, one of the things that I was speaking with our president the other day, and one of the things I was saying was that, so how much budget are you going to be giving us to bring our students offshore? Okay, the more budget you can give us, obviously the more students we can bring offshore to do face-to-face. Because in online international service learning is of course much lower than face-to-face service learning, right? However, having said that, one of the things that online international service learning can accommodate a lot more students, obviously, because of the cost, compared with face-to-face. But there's another thing. Why does it need to be either or? Can we have online international service learning be a precursor to before we bring our students on site? So that our students know a little bit about the target community already, so that they get to know each other already before they actually go on site. Right. So I don't see that it is an either or. Okay. Obviously, even though obviously there's like a money situation in there. Right. However, I see that the lessons that we learn from doing online service learning through these few years, maybe we can use those to help our students to learn even when travel is possible, like hopefully it will be going forward this year. So I hope I answered that question.
Thank you, Grace. Now, the next question is, what online activities do you do to foster connectedness to the service recipient, even with online service learning?
Reflection. Big part of it is reflection. We can do a lot of online activities. However, and I don't know whether or not this is a situation with Hong Kong students, but Hong Kong students are very task-oriented. We give them an icebreaker. We ask them, okay, do an icebreaker, do something to foster cultural exchange. And actually, one of the things that we always do is that we don't just simply go into the workshop. We ask, we organize a cultural exchange, cultural understanding, time before the workshop begins. However, one of the things that we have found with our students that's so task-oriented, okay, I need to do this cultural learning piece. Okay, so let's get this piece done. So what we need to do as teachers, as instructors, as teaching assistants, is to help our students to learn from this piece. What did you observe? Does that match with what you expected? In what ways does it match? In what ways does it not? Okay, and what is your takeaway from that? So I think that, how to build the connectedness, the big part really there is, help them to reflect and to observe from these experiences, at least for our students. That's all I can say. Yeah.
Okay, now the next question is, how much value does global learning add to civic learning of the students? I think that is a good question.
To us, it is a lot, and to us, it is very, very obvious. We do both. We talk about international service learning this time, but that doesn't mean that this is all that we do. Before we started going overseas, we have been working many years in Hong Kong, and the first place that we went beyond Hong Kong was mainland China. We worked in mainland China for several years before we even started going to Cambodia, and we continue to work in Hong Kong. And for PolyU as a whole, 3/4 of our service learning are done in Hong Kong. So that the majority of our work continues to be in Hong Kong. So that is definitely very valuable. But when we compare what the impact on the students between international service learning and let's say local service learning, the international element adds something which is very difficult to achieve, in local service learning. As we pointed out, just now. Now, Hong Kong may be a little bit of a special case. 95% of people in Hong Kong looks like me and Grace and the Professor Shed, even though we may not exactly be citizens of Hong Kong. Many of us actually hold foreign nationality. I'm not commenting on individuals, but in Hong Kong, that's a part of the reality. That makes the students much more comfortable in a certain way when they do local service learning. But once you take him or her out and put him or her in a position where they cannot speak Cantonese, that is a huge obstacle that they have to overcome. But if they can overcome it. And many of them are forced to because they have no other option, because the other party, they don't understand Cantonese as well. So you have to go into sign language or body language or go English or whatever means you can do to overcome that. That is difficult. That is in fact very hard for many of our students. But the amount of effort that they put in to overcome that obstacle helps them learn so much. I think as teachers, we all know that anything variable, anything of value needs effort. There is no free lunch. You cannot sit there and expect to become culturally diverse and be able to manage to deal with foreigners without making an effort.
Thank you, Stephen. Now, the next question is from Mikiko. As for learning outcome, was there any qualitative data from students' reflection? Note to explain why students' teamwork is negatively correlated with learning outcomes. It may be the case where students' definition of community or sense of the belonging change before and after international service learning.
That's a very good question. It is a big study that we are doing, and we basically promise our students. So we got consent from all of our students to also look at their reflections, but then we promised them that we would not look at the reflections until after the grading is completely finished. So therefore, the grading is still going on, so we cannot look at that yet. So we have some hypotheses about this, but yeah, we are still studying that. Yeah.
Good. Okay. The next question. In your context, what are the roles of the local university in this service learning collaboration?
It varies. It really depends on the country and the university and the particular situation. We have different kinds. We have some local universities which are quite active. Now, in the sense that they want to do service learning themselves, or they have already got quite a bit of experience. For example, University of Pretoria in South Africa, they already have very strong service learning elements. In fact, they have huge service learning classes with 1,000 students in one class. So for that kind of partner, it's very much a kind of an equal partnership. Each of us brings our own expertise into the partnership. So we serve together. But there are also some universities in some countries, particularly the developing countries, where they are beginning to get into service learning, or they have no experience at all, but they are interested. So in that case, we are offering our experience to them, so that they can begin to get more and actively involved. But we serve together. So there are various combinations, and there is no fixed formula.
I think one of the things, actually, Professor Daniel Sheck also has some projects that work that, in the Chinese mainland, which is a very different culture from Hong Kong. And his projects also collaborate with the local universities there. So actually, maybe Professor Sheck, could you also share about how, what is the role of your local partner in those collaborations?
Okay. I think in China, especially, if you want to do service learning in a smooth manner, you need to collaborate with local universities, because at least they know that you are not trying to brainwash the kids in China. So, well, it is just a joke. My feeling is that, first of all, they will try to secure some financial support, because in China, we got the 10,000 people scheme. So if you go over, the government will give you some subsidies, which is quite good. I think now is around 500 renminbi per day, okay? And of course, besides that, the university also helps to found suitable sites for our students. Say, if a school does not want to do this, then they have to find another school for us. And then the local students are also involved in two ways. The first one is they will help our students, say, to buy some material, because we're doing summer camps over there. So we need to buy some materials, and also they serve as the assessors. They assess the performance of the students. Of course, from a lay person perspective, we gave them some training, and then they will follow a guideline to do the assessment. Okay, so I think it is not particularly the situation in China. In fact, if you go elsewhere, I think we need to know the local culture. Say, for example, if some of the students get sick, or even with accident, they have to be sent to the hospital, then you must have some local people. They know the logistics, know which hospital is better than the other. So all this is very important. Okay. Thank you. So we got a final question from Mark again. If by 2028, the target is for all students to experience international service learning, how can it be done for students who won't be able to afford it? Okay, so we assume there's some student who cannot afford it to travel abroad. So maybe I can answer this question. Now, the first one is by 2028, actually, of course, if all students can go for international service learning, then we'll be very happy. But this is not our goal in a way, because we won't expect all students, all undergraduates, because we're talking about 3,000 something students. Now, maybe some of them will simply go for student exchange. They may go for some international conferences. Still, it would be fine. But of course, we want more students to go to join international service learning. But the capacity will be a problem. I can't imagine how we can offer more than 3,000 places for international service learning. So we are hopeful, but we will not be over ambitious. For the next question, which is very important, I think our policy all along at PolyU is that no student will be barred from joining overseas learning activities because of financial hardship. Now, let me give you some examples. Actually, we have such students already. So for students, they say, okay, even if you subsidize my airfare, my per diem, or I still won't got enough money because I have to do part-time work, or maybe even full-time work during summer to support my family. Now, what are we going to help those students? Now, the solution is very simple. Most of the time, we'll employ them as student helpers. Because for outbound trips, you need a lot of logistic support. Say, for example, you need somebody to take care of the materials, to take roll call, to take care of the air tickets, passports, things like that. So the students can help in that role, and then we'll pay them. So our policy is that no student will be disadvantaged if they got financial difficulty. And also, we do not want to stigmatize those students. So nobody knows that they help us because they got financial problem. We really want to treat everybody equal and help those who have needs. Okay. So okay, that's all, I think.
I think so, yeah.
Yes. Okay. So I think we got a perfect ending here. We're running overrun for 4 minutes only. Okay. So again, please join me to give a big round of applause to Grace and Stephen. Okay. Very good. Very good. Okay. So see you all again. And we really hope that the University Social Responsibility Network will thrive so that we can join hands to help our students, to nurture them, and also help those communities that need more help. Okay? Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.